Dear children, how are you all? So hope you all stay fit and fine. So children, let us start with the next part of the chapter, the enemy. So from today we would be initiating with the fifth part of the chapter, the enemy. So the chapter is really very interesting and hope you would have been paying attention upon the explanation properly and trying to prepare the things to the best possible extent. So let us see children. Let us start with the actual text. So thou hesitated again. The strange thing is, he said, that if the man were whole, I could turn him over to police without difficulty. So children, as you have already seen that Dr. Sadao and his wife Hana were really very compassionate people. So it was very difficult for them to allow a live man to become dead. So that is the kind of hesitation that is being discussed here. That is the kind of dilemma that is being discussed here. Sadao hesitated. Dr. Sadao had been able to identify the person. He had been able to realize that the person was an American prisoner of war. And definitely, if they had sheltered him home, they too would have been caught under the charges of being traitors. कि देशद्रोह के नाम पर उनको भी बंद किया जा सकता था. So that was the real dilemma before Dr. Sadao. He was not able to understand whether he should be performing his duties as a doctor or he should be performing his duties as a patriot. So the biggest question before Dr. Sadao is that if the man were whole, that if the man would have been living, if the man would have been conscious, definitely he was living but he was not conscious. So better say conscious. So definitely if the man would have been conscious, he wouldn't have got any difficulty in handing him over to police. But unfortunately this man was unconscious. I care nothing for him. He is my enemy. So that is what Dr. Sadao says here. That he hasn't got any kind of sentimental liking for that prisoner. He hasn't got any kind of sentimental attachment for the prisoner. And he does realize that the person is his enemy. That the person is the enemy of the state of Japan. And that is why the person is an enemy to Dr. Sadao as well. So he had been well able to appreciate all these things. There wasn't anything as such that Dr. Sadao was doing a breach to his responsibilities as a citizen. That is what he was not doing. All Americans are my enemy. So he says that all the Americans are the enemies of Japan in those situations particularly. And he is only a common fellow. So he is also just a common fellow. He is also just a common American. So definitely he must be considered to be an enemy. You see how foolish his face is. But since he is wounded, so this is what Dr. Sadao wanted to emphasize upon. That since he is wounded, that since the man is wounded, since he is lying unconscious, if he has been allowed to be dead, definitely that would be a breach to the laws of humanity. Definitely that would be a breach to the supreme law that has been settled by God. तो उन्होंने ये सोचा कि अगर ये आदमी जिंदा होता, इसी बात को लेकर के उनके अंदर हेजिटेशन थी कि अगर जिंदा तो था ही, मतलब कि अगर ये आदमी होशो हवास में होता तो वो निश्चित तौर पर उसको पुलिस के हवाले कर देते, क्योंकि उन्हें उससे कोई प्यार नहीं है, उन्हें उससे उसकी कोई कद्र नहीं है और वो उसे और उसकी तरीके के सारे अमेरिकन को अपना दुश्मन ही समझते हैं. लेकिन वो एक मासूम सा इंसान है जो कि बेहोश पड़ा हुआ है और अब अगर उसको मरने के लिए छोड़ दिया जाए तो ये निश्चित तौर पे बहुत बड़ा पाप होगा, ये निश्चित तौर पे एक मॉरल सिन होगा. तो यही बात कहीं ना कहीं डॉक्टर सदाव को परेशान कर रही थी. You also cannot throw him back to the sea, Hannah said. So in this way, children, you can see that Hannah had also been able to realize the weakness of her husband. She had also been able to realize that Dr. Sadao can never be such a hard-hearted fellow that he is going to throw a living man into the sea. कि एक जिंदा आदमी को समुद्र में फेंक देना, ऐसा क्रूर काम, ऐसा डिफिकल्ट काम उसके हस्बैंड डॉक्टर सदाव कभी नहीं कर सकते हैं. And that is why here she underlines the fact that you can also not throw him back to the sea. That you are really not such a hard-hearted fellow that you would be able to throw a living man into the sea because you are fearful of the consequences. Then there is only one thing to do. So in this way, ultimately, there was only one option out with them, and that was to help that person. That was to perform a surgery on that person and to let him live. That was the only option that they had been left out with. कि अब उनके पास एकमात्र एक ही ऑप्शन बचा था कि उसका इलाज किया जाए और उसे ठीक किया जाए. We must carry him into the house. So in this way, ultimately they decided that they are going to take him to their house. But the servant Sadav inquired. So Dr. Sadav was really quite fearful of what the servants are going to feel. He was quite fearful of the reaction of the servants because it was a war time, and particularly during the war time the patriotic sentiments of the people कि जो लोगों के अंदर जो एक राष्ट्रवाद होता है वो एकदम अपने चरम पे होता है और वो राष्ट्र के खिलाफ कुछ भी, खास करके ऐसे वक्त में जब दो देशों की लड़ाइयाँ चल रही हों, तब वो राष्ट्रवाद के खिलाफ कुछ भी नहीं कर पाते हैं, राष्ट्र के खिलाफ कुछ भी नहीं कर पाते हैं. तो डेफिनेटली इन दैट काइंड ऑफ अ सिचुएशन इट मस्ट हैव बीन वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर डॉक्टर सदाव एंड हाना टू कन्विंस देयर सर्वेंट्स that they did not intend anything wrong, कि उनका इरादा कुछ भी गलत नहीं है, उनका इरादा देशद्रोह नहीं है बल्कि इंसानियत है. इस बात को सर्वेंट्स को समझा पाना उस कंडीशन में बहुत ही डिफ़िकल्ट होने वाला था. तो ये बात उनको कहीं ना कहीं परेशान कर रही थी. वो सोच रहे थे कि हाउ दे आर गोइंग टू कन्विंस देयर सर्वेंट्स अबाउट व्हाट दे आर गोइंग टू डू, हाउ वुड दे मेक देम बी एट ईज दैट दे आर नॉट डूइंग एनी एक्ट ऑफ ट्रेजन, कि वो कोई देशद्रोह का काम नहीं कर रहे हैं, rather they are serving the person on the humanitarian grounds. So that was still lingering as a very difficult question before Dr. Sadav. That was still lingering as a very difficult scenario before Dr. Sadav as to how he is going to handle the case of servants. तो आपने समझ लिया होगा कि वो यही सोच सोच करके परेशान थे कि आखिर इन सर्वेंट्स को कैसे मनाया जाएगा. You must think of children and your position. So in this way here children, you can see that there had been going on a lot of discussion between Dr. Sadav and Hana as to what should be done with that person. So Hana had been giving a very genuine advice to Dr. Sadav that this kind of a thing, this kind of an action is really going to tarnish his reputation, and definitely the life of the children and the safety of the children is also going to be at risk. That if they are caught doing this kind of an act of treason, definitely they are going to be imprisoned, कि उन्हें जेल में डाल दिया जाएगा अगर उन्हें ऐसा करते हुए पकड़ा गया तो. It would endanger all of us if we did not give this man over as a prisoner of war. So that is what they were thinking, that it is going to endanger them all if that man has not been surrendered as a prisoner of war to military, because this is the war time going on. Certainly, Sadav agreed. So now you can see children that Dr. Sadav was in agreement with Hana. I would not think of doing anything else. So Dr. Sadav says that he was also thinking of doing the same thing, that he wanted to hand over the stranger to the military. But the problem is that he is unconscious, and if in this kind of a situation he has been handed to military, he would die on account of the torture of the enemy, on account of the torture of the Japanese army that American is going to receive as an enemy. That is what I mean to say. कि वो यही सोच रहे थे कि अगर वो इस आदमी के साथ में पकड़े गए या ये आदमी उनके घर में पकड़ा गया तो उनको देशद्रोह के नाम पर सजा हो जाएगी और बच्चों की ज़िंदगी बर्बाद हो जाएगी. तो इसी चीज़ को लेकर के एक डायलेमा, इसी चीज़ को लेकर के एक पशुपेश की स्थिति से गुजर रहे थे ये लोग. Thus agreed together they lifted the man. So in this way, ultimately they lifted the man and they decided that they are going to give him treatment, whatever the consequences may be. He was very light, like a fowl that had been half-starved for a long time, until it is only feathers and skeleton. So children, what you have been told here, that by this time the man had really lost his weight to a great extent, that the man was appearing to be very light. It was just appearing to be a bird that had been half-starved. It was just appearing to be a fowl. Fowl is the name of a bird. It was just appearing to be a bird that had been half-starved. कि जैसे कोई चिड़िया जिसे आधे टाइम तक भूखा रखा जाए, जिसे half-starved रखा जाए, जिसको आधा पेट ही खाना मिला हो, तो वो जैसी एकदम हल्की फुल्की हो जाएगी, वैसा ही हल्का फुल्का ये सोल्जर हो गया था. क्योंकि डेफिनेटली इन द मिलिट्री कस्टडी ही वुड हैव बीन स्टार्व्ड, ही वुड हैव बीन टॉर्चर्ड. उसको बहुत यातनाएं मिली होंगी, तो उसी के परिणाम स्वरूप वो इतना बुरी स्थिति में आ गया था. Until it is only feathers and skeleton. So the condition of that prisoner was just like the condition of a fowl that has been half starved, till it remains only as feathers and skeleton. Feathers and skeleton means कि जब केवल पंखों का और हड्डियों का कंकाल भर ही बचे, तो उस कंडीशन में किसी चिड़िया को छोड़ दिया जाए तो ऐसी कंडीशन इसकी थी कि अब इसके शरीर में केवल कंकाल और थोड़ा सा मांस ही बचा था, केवल स्केलेटन और थोड़ा सा मांस ही बचा था, बाकी अब इस प्रिजनर के शरीर में कुछ रह नहीं गया था, इतनी बुरी यातना इसको दी गई थी। तो अब ये बात आपने देखी और समझ ली होगी। So his arms hanging, they carried him up the steps into the side door of the house. So children, here you can see that in this way that prisoner had been taken into the house of Dr. Sadao. His arms were hanging like this, means he was unconscious and that is why his arms were hanging, कि वो बेहोश था इस वजह से उसके हाथ लटक रहे थे, और इस कंडीशन में उसको उठा करके वो लोग अपने घर के अंदर लेकर के गए। They carried him up the steps into the side door of the house. तो स्टेप्स पर से होकर के वो उसको साइड डोर से अंदर लेकर के गए। This door opened into a passage. So that particular door was connected to a passage, कि उस डोर से एक अंदर की तरफ एक रास्ता कनेक्टेड था। And down the passage they carried the man towards an empty bedroom. और उसी पैसेज से हो करके एक रास्ता जाता था एक खाली बेडरूम की तरफ। तो in this way the person had been taken into one of the bedrooms that was lying empty, कि वो पैसेज से होकर के दरवाजे से होकर के उसको एक कमरे के अंदर लेकर के गए कि जो कमरा अभी तक खाली था। Been the bedroom of Sadao's father, and since his death it had not been used. So what you have been told here children, that the room into which that prisoner had been taken, कि जिस कमरे के अंदर उसको ले जाया गया था, that had belonged to Dr. Sadao's father, वो रूम डॉक्टर सदाओ के फादर का था, और डॉक्टर सदाओ के फादर की डेथ के बाद से वो कमरा खोला नहीं गया था। That room was closed since then. तो आपने समझ लिया होगा कि the prisoner had been taken into an empty room and that empty room had belonged to Dr. Sadao's father, and after his death the room was not opened. They laid the man on the deeply matted floor. So it was a well furnished room children, you can understand that on the floor there was a very decent kind of flooring that was deep matted, कि फर्श के ऊपर एक कालीन टाइप का कुछ पड़ा हुआ था, कोई फ्लोरिंग पड़ी हुई थी जो काफ़ी डीप मैटेड थी कि उसमें आप पैर रखेंगे तो थोड़ा सा पैर अंदर घुस जाएगा, इस तरीके से डीप मैटेड फ्लोरिंग थी। एवरीथिंग हियर हैड बीन जापानीज टू प्लीज द ओल्ड मैन। सो चिल्ड्रन, एज यू हैव प्रीवियसली नोटिस्ड दैट डॉक्टर सदाओ's father was a very great patriot and he always liked only the Japanese things. So the entire room had been equipped with Japanese items only. There wasn't anything foreign that had been put in the room of Dr. Sadao's father. Everything that had been arranged there in the room of Sadao's father was Japanese. He would never in his own home sit on a chair or sleep in a foreign bed. So that was the matter of the taste of Dr. Sadao's father, that he did not like anything that was foreign. He never sat on a chair or he never lay in a bed that was foreign. That was not Japanese. कि अगर सब कुछ Japanese नहीं होता था तो वो उस चीज़ को इस्तेमाल नहीं करते थे। इतने ज़्यादा वो ट्रेडिशनल, इतने ज़्यादा वो ऑर्थोडॉक्स किस्म के पैट्रियट थे कि वो हर चीज़ केवल Japanese ही चाहते थे, बाकी किसी दूसरे देश की बनी हुई किसी चीज़ पे उनको ना तो भरोसा था ना उसे वो पसंद करते थे। Hana went to the wall cupboards and slid back a door and took out a soft quilt. So children, here you can see how wonderfully they have been taking care of that prisoner, that however he is an enemy, yet he is very well taken care of in the house of Dr. Sadao. So after his arrival into the room, Hana herself went to the wall cupboards. Wall cupboards जैसे दीवार में अलमारियां बनी होती हैं तो उस तरीके से वॉल कबर्ड्स थी, तो हाना वहां तक गई, उसने पार्टीशन को स्लाइड बैक किया, उसके ऊपर एक स्लाइडिंग डोर रहा होगा तो उसको स्लाइड बैक किया और उसमें से एक सॉफ्ट क्विल्ट, एक बड़ी मुलायम सी रजाई निकाली और वो उस पर्सन को उड़ा दी, क्योंकि वो जाड़े से ठिठुर रहा था, अपनी अनकॉन्शियस में भी वो जाड़े से ठिठुर रहा था। तो that is what you have been told here, that Hana herself went to the wall cupboards and she slid back a partition and took out a soft quilt, एक सॉफ्ट रजाई उसने निकाली और उस पर्सन को उड़ा दी। The quilt was covered with flowered silk and the lining was pure white silk. So it was a very decent kind of quilt. It was really a very high standard quilt. बड़ी ही आलीशान रजाई थी। उसमें ऊपर की तरफ जो उसका पोर्शन था उसके ऊपर फ्लावर्ड सिल्क थी, ऊपर की तरफ जो है वो बहुत बढ़िया प्रिंटेड सिल्क का कपड़ा लगा हुआ था, एंड द इनसाइड दैट इज लाइनिंग, जो लाइनिंग होती है इसको हम अस्तर बोलते हैं हिंदी में, तो रजाई का जो अस्तर था, रजाई की जो लाइनिंग थी दैट वाज प्योर वाइट सिल्क। तो इट वाज रियली अ वेरी डिसेंट काइंड ऑफ क्विल्ट, but they did not care for the delicateness of the item. They did not care for the value of the items that they had been giving to that prisoner of war. वो एक बड़ी महंगी, बहुत अच्छी, बहुत खूबसूरत रजाई थी, लेकिन उन्होंने वो भी उसको उड़ा दी, ये सोचे बिना कि वो ठीक रहेगी कि खराब हो जाएगी. He is so dirty, she murmured in distress. So, however, definitely, for a while, Hannah would have thought that the man is really so dirty that her quilt is going to be ruined, that her quilt is going to be spoiled away. कि उसने ये सोचा होगा कि ये इतना गंदा आदमी है तो रजाई जो है वो खराब हो जाएगी, लेकिन फिर भी आगे कुछ सोचे बिना उसने उसको वो रजाई हैंड ओवर कर दी, उसको उड़ा दी कि चलो ठीक है हमारे घर में है तो इसे कोई तकलीफ नहीं होनी चाहिए. तो दैट इज द पार्ट ऑफ देयर कर्टसी.